Welcome to a question and answer on Dusty. You guys asked questions and we want to go through each one of them and answer them. And then if we miss any, or if you have new ones, ask them below. And if there's enough, we'll do another video.
Yeah, thanks for all these questions and cheers, guys.
Cheers. It's really, really bright. It's white snow everywhere behind the camera.
Sorry if we're squinting.
Into a very blistering sun, but it feels so warm, huh?
Really happy to have the sun. Can't complain about it.
And nice too, just to pull off on the side of the road, feeling like it's Christmas, even though it's September.
We have been singing Christmas carols.
Yeah, well, I've been listening to you sing.
Yeah, I've been singing Christmas carols.
I sang a little bit.
When it snowed, I had to wake up and sing It's Beginning to Look a Lot Like
Well,
Christmas.
at least it really feels like it compared to the Southwest.
Yeah.
So, we're gonna go through some questions from some of our patrons first, and I think I've answered a lot of theirs already online, but I want to go through them because they're good questions. Any plans for suspension upgrades in the future or keeping it as is? How does Tim cope with not being able to drive as fast as you could in Goose? So, not a lot. You know, it's funny, this truck at lower speed type stuff, so like that chattery, rocky, sort of like the size of a cabbage type rocks, this truck is quicker. In rock crawly stuff, we're more careful with it because it's worth more.
Yeah, and a little less clearance, but not a lot.
Yeah, because of the tire size really is the only reason we lack clearance. I think the box doesn't really inhibit it, but I guess width-wise, it's slightly wider.
A tiny bit, yeah, but barely noticeable really.
So we really don't drive slower. I drive the same speed. On pavement, I drive faster because the diesel actually has more power than Goose. This truck's lighter than Goose, so it feels like it has more power, even if it's fairly similar to the gas engine.
Yeah, I think like the type of driving that we're doing is better suited for this, whereas Goose, yes, you could do a lot faster speeds, but we never really found the use for it, except maybe when we were doing like before we quit our jobs and stuff, and you'd do like 2 weeks in Baja, and then it was fun to race around. But
totally, and that was pre Camp Tech pop top.
Yep.
And so back in those days, it was very low center of gravity, really nice shocks that were fresh, and we would haul real fast because I was used to pre-running and racing in Baja. So, you know, when you only have a few days, you're not as worried about breaking something as when it becomes your home. And then of course, once we cut off the roof and put on the Camp Tech, it just in general felt more top heavy, and we just slowed our pace down. So I feel like I actually drive quicker in this because it's got both sway bars attached.
Brakes a little bit better.
Brakes better, accelerates better, you know. So, but in terms of the first question, are we gonna change it? I do think I may slightly upgrade from the super cheap Dobinsons we have, which are the, you know, sort of the cheapest ones they sell, which have been great, to the, I think they call them IMS. They're basically like these, except much bigger diameter, and you get a much greater oil volume. And so I might go to those. They're still fairly inexpensive. We are not gonna go to the racing style shocks. On Goose, because I used to work for the company that built those shocks, we got a big discount, like an employee type discount, even though I hadn't worked there in like 15 years. But so we went for the fancy ones, and they were cool. But when they blow out, I mean, this one shock is worth over $1,000. You want to rebuild it and keep using it. That's, well, as we found, I would say tough, but we found it almost impossible to find anyone who could competently rebuild it.
Outside
I didn't have the tools, outside the US. With the tools, Europe would be easy. If you happen to be near where the Dakar rally's happening, I'm sure it'd be easy. But we had it redone by some guys who say they raced in Bolivia, and like 2 weeks later, blew right back out. So it's tough. It's this thing you've invested in that you need to fix. I actually am liking having these shocks where if one were to blow out entirely or snap the pin off or something like that, or the eyelet, I would just throw it in the trash and go, what do you got? You got a Rancho, you got a KYB, you got a, you know, anything, Bilstein, what do you got? And I'll put it on there. And it's fine. It's going to be fine.
Yeah.
So you don't have so much money invested in them. So I feel like that's actually a nicer way for us to go, being in foreign countries. In the US, I might try some fancy stuff.
Yeah. And so far, the only thing we've done is we did put new rear springs.
Yeah, new rear springs.
To make it a little bit higher, because I think the old ones were a little just worn out. Yeah,
this truck's had 3 different suspension systems on it. So Maltec makes one specifically built for this truck. Not all Maltecs, but for the 80 series, which is the one they built the most of. They know the exact weight distribution of it. They know the truck so well. It's not an extended chassis 80. It's not, you know, it's not as messed with. And so they have a kit and they have specific Eibach coils made for the truck and specific shocks. I can't remember what they use, but really nice setup. The previous owner of this thought it felt too rough, too taut, which is, if you're not used to racing suspension, it sometimes feels too harsh. He pulled it off and sold it and put on this Dobinson's fairly kind of an entry-level kit.
Yeah.
But we found it to be remarkable and rides better than Goose in most circumstances, except for high-speed hits, because it's not a big shock with an internal air bump stop and all that. Okay, we're probably done enough on shocks, but we love this. It rides super good. We might go to a greater oil volume so it stays cool, because we do like to do long days at high speed. Other than that, I think we're going to leave it.
Yeah, we're very happy with how it rides. You know, not upset with it at all. So
nope.
It's fine.
All right, moving right along. Which diesel is it? The 1HDT 12 valve or 24? This is the 12 valve. 24 would be, and if I'm not exact on the year, I apologize, 95 and newer, I believe, would be the 1HDT FT. Sorry, the 1HD FT. We have the 1HDT. No complaints with it. I wouldn't bother upgrading it. Of course, the FTE, which never came in an 80 series, only came in the 70 series and in the 100 series, is often swapped into these. Neat, great, but we're looking for longevity and reliability, not speed or power.
Yeah.
What consumes the most power in Dusty? Electronically, I would say your laptop probably, because if she edits for 6 or 7 hours at 10 amp hours per hour, you know, that's 70 amp hours. And right now, anyways, we have a 100 amp hour lithium battery. So if you're not getting some sun in or running the truck, you can eat a lot of your juice just via that. I would say the second most is the electric kettle, which we added because we had so much electric power. We don't have to use an electric kettle. We're still carrying the same MSR reactor we took to South America. We just haven't used it once since we bought this truck.
And luckily with that one, it's, you know, maybe at most 2 minutes. I haven't timed it, but you know, it's a short burst of usage, whereas
like
the laptop
70 amp hours per hour, but it's 3 minutes. So it's not actually that much. It might eat up 7 or whatever amp hours. How well insulated is the rear of Dusty? I'll turn that question into the rear, but also the whole truck. The rear door and all that's super well insulated. We don't really have any draft or any feeling. The whole box is insulated. All the windows are dual pane. And so we found that you can have all the windows closed, but the light coming in, and it's fine, and you'll stay warm. I would say our most sort of battened down will do for super cold weather, like last night was, let's say, negative, below 0, -5, whatever, -10, whatever it was. We'll actually even close the sunshade, and that adds one more layer of an air gap.
Yeah.
And so you have a dual pane window plus that close, and then
it does make a difference. Oddly.
It does seem to make a difference. When all 5 have that sunshade up, you realize there's less of that cold feeling coming through the windows.
And then we obviously pull the top down so it's not like tent material in there, and then it's really pretty dang insulated. Yeah.
And then one more we can do, and we never have because we wake up sweating as it is you can zip close the pass-through, and the pass-through is insulated. And the main place where your cold air comes from, cold weather comes from, is the front windows.
Yeah.
And so if you were to zip that off and close off the cab of the truck, that would insulate you the most. We just haven't gotten there, and
haven't needed to
I hope we never are in something that's -50 or whatever, and we need to do that.
Yeah.
So let's see, how old is the car and the Maltec Build?
The truck is a 1990. And then when was the box? Like 2017 it was built on there? Yeah, 2017 the box was built. This truck, now it depends. Different Maltecs are different, right? It's sort of like a restoration company where some people want every nut and bolt touched, and that's gonna like not quite double the cost of the truck, but it is an immense cost. I'm comfortable with doing all that, even though I don't really want to. And so this one was more like an individual who had traveled with Maltec before on some of their trips, who had this exact truck, but a normal 80 series, went to them and wanted it built into a Maltec. And then when it was done, I think you know, didn't have the money or something. I don't know the full story, but it was one of the Overland Expo trucks they brought to Overland Expo 2018. Yep. I think it was. This and the Sackware truck. Not the truck that Tim from Sackware currently drives with the 70 series front end, but the gray 80 series Maltec and this were built the same year.
but that's a good example of that other truck was the built to the hilt. Every nut and bolt, the axles were pulled apart,
all
rebuilt.
the options.
Yeah, basically anything, any new parts you can get from Toyota were put on it. This truck was much more of an 80 series, 1990, first year of the 80, a year before we even got them in the US, manual transmission, and it was built. This person asked, the reason I'm asking is because I sold what is supposedly one of the most reliable 4x4s in history, a Land Cruiser 105, after owning it for 3 years, during which I had a long list of problems with it. So for me, he's asking, how do we find one that we're going to trust? And part of me looks at it and says, did anyone care for it? And this truck was cared for, nowhere near to the level that I wanted it to be cared for, or I needed it to be cared for to trust it. But I knew that it wasn't beyond help, so to speak. Like, it didn't have bent axles, it didn't have a bent frame, it didn't have a ton of rust.
It was all stuff we were willing to take on, and that's pretty much what we've spent now, like the last year, doing, is just, you know, getting it up to snuff, basically, shipshape.
Yeah, really. I keep thinking that we've only had it for like 4 or 5 months, but really we're going on 10 months now or something like that. But yeah, so, you know, rebuild the axles, maybe it's not 10 months, whatever. Somebody will correct us in the comments.
We got it in March.
Yeah.
And it's September.
So not that many.
Do math.
All right, but we've, you know, we were basically full time when we weren't mapping in it, just basically doing preventative maintenance and repairing things that, you know, I could tell I would have done long ago. Finding nuts and bolts that weren't OEM, replacing them with OEM, and just going through it so we can really trust it to go around the world. And as soon as we're done with this trip, I waited to rebuild the axles because neither one was leaking bad, but both kind of, you know, I could tell we're sort of nearing it.
Yeah, we just want to make sure everything's
We've put almost 30,000 miles on the truck now. And
hard miles too, not easy miles.
Yeah, the mapping miles were immensely hard. The miles up here are tough too, obviously. We're off-roading quite a bit, but we're doing a decent amount of highway. The first 15,000 miles were all low-range mapping and just beating it to death. And it hasn't had any major flaws. We had the power steering pump blow a seal, little stuff. So I think the way you find that truck you're gonna trust is it cannot be too far gone in the ways you can't repair it. If it's too rusty, it's never gonna become unrusty. If the engine is blown or has serious issues, unless you're willing to replace that or rebuild it completely, that's maybe a little too far gone. So I feel like because of our videos, a lot of people have bought 80 series
thinking that they're the most reliable, and they are.
And if they're
really
dialed,
good.
they are. I think they're remarkable. They're so overbuilt, it's ridiculous.
But it's still an old vehicle.
This is a 30-year-old truck, and we'll travel with people who have a 10-year-old truck of some other make, and it's extraordinary what a 30-year-old truck can do for you, but don't forget it's 30 years old. So I don't know. I don't know what to say on how to find one, except, you know, you got to remember they're old. If you're not into working onto it, if you're not into working on your truck, buy something newer. I mean, absolutely, a 200 series, one of these, I mean, turn the key and go, and you're within the first 25 years of its life cycle, meaning you should have no major issues. Okay, so maybe you blow a CV. That's like the easiest thing to replace on earth.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the truck is perfect. Cool. It's not an A series, it's not a 70, who cares?
Yeah.
But I really think that unless you're willing to really dive in, buy something newer.
Yeah,
certainly. I love 80s, but you're not going to go 30 years old and go, I've heard it's the best, so I just won't touch it and it'll be okay. Not saying that you did that, but I do think too many people assume that it's magical almost. It is from an era of Toyota that I do think is magical.
Very reliable, yeah.
But
that doesn't mean you don't have to do maintenance and repair things eventually.
Somebody asked, how do you like the rear access versus the side door? So I think like in theory, I first thought I want a side door because on Goose we lived at the side of the truck.
And you figure like the awning is there, so you can just get right out and you'll be undercover. And in reality, it's not as convenient. Like if you crawl into both trucks, one with the rear and one with the side, the rear is, because it has the slant, you're crawling like up in. And you don't really have to duck or feel awkward. You just kind of
you're not really crawling. You just walk up into it like you're getting up into a spaceship. I know that's a ridiculous comparison, but picture a hatch on something that's at a 45. You walk up into it. You don't ever have to bend down. When we started looking at side doors, most of them are these squat little short side doors. And then you'll notice a couple of the trucks that Maltec has built, they're really extra tall boxes because to have a full-size door, you know, it has to be the height of a person, right? Because you're walking directly in it. We also like that right now, every point of the vehicle that you live in has an entry door. So passenger side, driver's side, and the back. So you're always near all the stuff you want to grab. Whereas if you have passenger, driver, and a door right next to the driver or passenger, then everything at the back of the truck is a get in and walk to the back or crawl to the back if the top's down. So I kind of like having that access on all sides.
Yeah.
All that being said, it is what it is. So
yeah, you'll get used to anything.
If this truck had a side door, we'd be telling you how it's worked out great for us. And, you know, because that's what we have, right? Those are the pluses I see with having the back. And I do like it. There's no silt or dust that leaks in.
No.
So I find no negative to it.
No.
I do like when it's open, it's like a little awning. So one of us can stand out there in the snow or the rain, get some video, set up a chair and hang out. But those are the pluses of the back door.
You get nice airflow too with the back being able to be open. Like we have the little bug screen so we can leave that open and it gives nice airflow.
Yeah, Kelsey sewed that little netting with some magnets in it. And so the whole back can be open and it's like a big airflow. Or we do have a pretty good sized window that's also nice.
Yeah.
But if it's hot, we tend to open the whole thing and let a major airflow open the side windows. So we like it, but then again, we haven't lived in a truck with a side door.
Yeah.
So. Is there one thing in particular that Dusty does not have that you wish he did? And that's changed. When that was asked, that may have been before we got the heater working properly, before we had solar, before we had lithium, before we had a better water filter.
Yeah.
So we've done most of the stuff we wished he had. If there's anything you could add right now, what would it be?
It's really tough. Because I feel like he's so luxurious. I can't think of anything that I would add that also wouldn't take away from how capable and like light and the size of him, you know? I think you're totally changing a vehicle. We have a shower. That was a huge thing.
Yeah, I wouldn't want a shower inside.
Goose. No.
On the Dalton Highway, I mean, it's icy terrain and there's caribou off in the distance and we're just showering outside and wearing swim trunks because we're next to the highway. And, you know, once you're done, you're a little cold, but we have the heater running. So you just hop in and have that warm air blowing on you. And then she hopped out and did her shower. So it was fine. And then that, all because of that, of course, showering side would be better, but what we'd have to do and the space we'd have to dedicate to it.
Yeah, it's too much.
So the only thing I think I would like to add is a small freezer would be nice.
That would be nice,
to freeze some meats.
Good one.
Not a big one, but just if at some point we put a center console fridge in this, one that can freeze, we might just crank it really high and have the center console be where you keep some frozen meats. I don't know, something like that.
Yeah, that's a good one. Honestly, I can't think of anything else that I'm really missing or wish I had.
Okay, moving on to some questions from Instagram. Is it more top heavy than Goose? No, it's less. So the whole roof is a chunk of carbon fiber. And then the composite box itself is composite and carbon. And so there's not much weight up top besides that tire. So to me, visually, it looks top heavy because it's tall looking.
And it has stuff up there.
And it has stuff up there, which of course, if you're building a truck, you know, I don't like putting big heavy rooftop tents on trucks and all that sort of stuff because it does make it feel more top heavy. This has so little weight up top that you can get away with the tire and it's still less top heavy than Goose.
It was incredible when we first drove it to notice the difference of like feeling way more comfortable on tippy stuff. Part of that is having sway bars too, but it is much lighter. When I first went to push up the top, it was like, you know, when you lift up a carton of milk and there's like nothing in it, but you think it's full and it's like, whew. And so I went to like push the top up and it would just like, it's so light compared to what Goose's top was. So yeah, just weight is way different. And everything is pretty low. The center of gravity, all the water, the gas, I keep calling it gas, the diesel is really low. So he feels really planted. Yeah.
So in that sense, it's a big upgrade for us and doing some of those shelf trails where the inside track of a shelf road tends to get built up with sediment that's falling and eroding from the mountain. So you're always tilted out to the cliff. We can do much, much tippier situations without worrying at all, which has been nice. Has diesel been problematic or hard to find? No, and it's an odd time. I always grew up thinking diesel was more expensive than gasoline, and probably it was. I don't think I was wrong in that thought. But everywhere we've been here in Alaska, it's significantly cheaper than gasoline. So whatever, we just lucked out on the timing or whatever, but gasoline seems to be more expensive than diesel where we've been shopping. And we've been able to find diesel everywhere we've wanted to, but you have to keep in mind this has a massive fuel range. With 65 gallons of diesel, We filled up in Fairbanks, Alaska, did the Prudhoe Bay run all the way up there, and then back. But then we went to Manly Hot Springs and some hunting side roads off-roading, and then we hit up Fairbanks and filled up the tanks. And we had a quarter tank left.
Yeah.
So it's kind of ridiculous the distance you can go. So we haven't had any issues, but we even wait to find the cheapest diesel. So like once we saw that Anchorage had a Costco, they had 2 Costcos, and one was 30 or 40 cents cheaper per gallon than the other. I have no idea why. One must have been just outside a tax zone. We, went out of our way to wait and get down there and fill up. So it's really nice.
And excuse me, internationally too, everywhere has big trucks that are using diesel. So
yeah.
We
so
never experienced. We did experience once where there was a roadblock and they had run low on diesel.
Yeah, but at that same time, we couldn't get gasoline at the first gas station because they were out of gasoline.
So it was kind of a fluke.
So the couple we were traveling with at the time, who were in a diesel truck and were in gasoline Goose, we filled up at the one we could fill up at, and then, or no, we couldn't. So we all went to the next one thinking, and they just waited thinking, well, we'll fill up when they fill up. That one was out of diesel. So it's just bad timing that the one we were at had no gasoline. The one we then drove to had no diesel. And when I say drove to, it's not in the same town. We went to a whole nother city in Bolivia to get diesel. And at that point, they knew they couldn't make it back to the other one because there was a roadblock and it was quite far. So, there's always a situation, but Dan Greck's argument that scooters and little gasoline powered things are all over the world is true. And then I also think that commercial vehicles to bring supplies to every town are everywhere as well. So, and then with our massive range, I'm not worried about it.
And also we don't have to worry as much about the quality of the diesel versus
we need to get any water out of it
and
any sediment out of it. So we have a good filtration system. But as long as you get the water and the sediment out, not such a big worry. Whereas in like Bolivia, we ran into a couple in a beautiful 70 series with a box on it. And it had the newer, because in Europe you can't get the diesels anymore from Toyota. So it had the Tacoma engine, and it was driving in safe mode. It was basically unable to go above 30 miles an hour because the fuel was so poor. Our truck in Goose, we were able to retard the timing of the engine to run on really bad gasoline. With a diesel, we don't have to worry about that. I mean, pretty much anything will burn through this.
Not that, I think
truck.
anything is fine to travel, and we're not saying that diesel is superior to gas or anything like that, but you'll be fine in whatever you have, really.
Plans for solar? Yes, we did it. 252 watts of Sunflare Explorers thin panels, and it's been great having it. Right now, we're probably pulling in probably 160 or something like that watts last time I checked.
Angle.
Yeah, now that we've got it up, it could be 200, but we're pretty high up here in the latitude, so not the full 252. Weight when loaded out for travel. Okay, I'm gonna go to an email I have of the weights that I looked up.
We also measured, or weighed, not measured, we weighed the truck.
Yeah, we did 2 weighings. So we did one at a friend's place who had a race car, so we had a scale under each tire. And so we put it on the lift, lowered it down on that so you can tell the weight of each one. We were shocked to find that it was fairly equally balanced, which I'm surprised by because the big 41-gallon diesel tank's in the rear, but it was pretty much even. So the rear was, I think, about 10% more heavy than the front.
Yeah, when it was full. Yeah.
Okay, so the weights that we've measured in the truck, when we first bought the truck, we went ahead to the friend's house and we weighed in. I posted it to Instagram back then, 6,392 pounds, ready to go. And that's full diesel, full everything. I'll explain what those weights are. We have 394 pounds of diesel. Hopefully my math is correct. This is from many months ago, but 65, or maybe at this time I didn't know we had 65 gallons. Well, whatever. 65 gallons of diesel, whatever that weighs. 175 pounds of water. We had 218 pounds in batteries, and when we switched to the lithium batteries from anti-gravity,
made a big difference in weight
we
there.
saved 170 pounds right there.
Yeah.
But then in all the stuff we've been carrying for the work we were doing, we have mountain bike gear in here still, even though we've dropped the mountain bikes.
We have too much stuff.
We ended up weighing more, I think closer to 6,500. So even though we weighed it at 6,392 pounds, we're much closer to 65 or 65.50 when we weighed it at a truck stop in Oregon.
Yep.
So that's about what we weigh in at. You know, the gross vehicle weight rating of the truck is 6,600, and if you know 80 series, you can generally grossly overload that without any major issues.
Yeah.
As long as you're willing to deal with not having the greatest braking system or whatever. So that's sort of the numbers.
Compared to Goose, I think that's one of the other questions.
Yeah, so Goose in full travel setup, we were over 7,000, but just barely. By the time
that was with like crazy water and all the auxiliary tank fuel like full and that sort of thing. So.
And then by the time we weighed him, we'd already pulled the auxiliary tank because it was leaking during the trip. So I didn't want to sell him with a leaking tank because if somebody tried to weld it, or what if it leaked and caught on fire? So we pulled that 20-gallon tank, it was 18 and a half, but we pulled that 18.5-gallon tank and all the fuel that would have gone in there.
Yeah.
We had the water out of it, a lot of our stuff out. The fridge was still in, but none of our personal stuff.
Yeah.
And he weighed in almost the same, like 6,400 pounds. So it was really all the weight of the fluids that made him so heavy.
Yeah.
But he was almost 7,000. So at 6,500 or 6,392, once we get this back
fully
down,
loaded,
hopefully to the lower weight, this is much, much lighter. Well, part of it too, I think, is a smaller tire size. It feels lighter.
Yeah.
You know? Okay, let's see. Overall height. So it depends if it's loaded or not. So if we have all the fuel tanks full, we're closer to 2.25 meters. And I'm sorry, we do it in meters because everywhere we've been traveling, all the garages of the Airbnbs or the hotels or the parking garage that you need to park in to go see the town are all in meters.
So I'll put it on the screen, whatever that is. And
yes. So we're closer to 2.3 or 2.3 and then some with everything empty because the back end gets higher, and it's that back end that's the highest point of the truck when it's a little bit stink bug. So that's the overall height of the truck. It's very similar to Goose, so we haven't seen many issues. What does the cooking setup look like? Hopefully you saw the walkthrough, but it's a Webasto diesel cooktop, no diesel fumes inside. It's glass like an electric cooktop, and then it burns diesel, has an external exhaust, and heats up the stovetop. We've actually really grown to like it.
Yeah, once you get used to cooking with it, it's pretty easy.
Yep.
Yeah.
What's your method for keeping moisture out of it? We really, until we got to Alaska, had seen no moisture on the inside. So it's so insulated that it didn't seem to condense on the windows or anything like that.
And now it does a little on the rear windows, but not a lot, nothing to be bothersome. And then in the front is where you really get most of the condensation, just because that's where it's least insulated, I think. But it hasn't been an issue. It's just the windows that are wet, and wipe them off in the morning, and they don't get anything else wet. You know,
yeah, and if it's not an extremely cold night like the other night, we'll just turn on the defroster, and just that hot air or just air in general moving over the moisture dries it out. And then like last night, if it's an extreme amount, we'll take paper towels and just wipe off the windows in the morning. Driving impressions versus the 1FZE. We kind of went over that, but in every way, this is better, I would say, except top speed, because I don't want to rev this engine out. So somewhere around 70, 75 miles an hour.
Yeah.
This truck is geared 3.73, which is very high, I guess you'd call it. Depends on how you think of gearing, which you call it. But most trucks like Goose, factory is like a 410, and then people re-gear it, and we re-geared Goose to 456. These trucks being 373 were more of the European diesel trucks, got such a high speed gearing for the Autobahn. But you know, with the tall 33.5-inch tires, I mean, 65 all day long is not a big deal.
No.
And we can pass somebody doing 70 or 75, and then you feel like you're kind of revving out the engine, and we want it to last a long time. So I would say that's the one difference is Goose, you could drive 85 miles an hour with the big 35s on a downhill.
It wasn't super comfortable.
No.
I'd say he cruised more like 70, 75 pretty comfortably, and this is maybe 65, 70 pretty comfortably.
Yep.
So it's a little slower.
But going up a hill, I like this better. Off the line, this is faster. Engine braking is nice because of the diesel and the manual to be able to engine brake on a downhill. How does it feel to be living the dream? Feels pretty good.
Pretty good, yeah.
Yeah, it's exhausting.
Especially on a sunny day
really
in the snow right now. It's pretty awesome.
Absolutely.
Sometimes it hits you.
Are the Shieldman seats way better than stock?
Yes, absolutely.
How much are they worth?
I would buy them. I would, because of what we're doing and that we're in them so much, it's worth it to me. If we were just doing the weekend trips, I would still really want them, but I don't know that it would be worth it.
Yeah.
They're really, really comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, the price is immensely high, and I've always said if they weren't in this truck, would I have gone out of my way to buy them? Probably not. But now knowing how good they are, we live in these seats.
And they're so much lighter and they take up so much less space than the stock seats. That would be another huge thing for the way we are living.
And, you know, we've done not just a 12-hour day, but when we were working, we, for several weeks until we just felt too beat up, then we reduced it to 10-hour days. But we did 12-hour days again and again and again and again. Really no breaks. I mean, we'd get out to use the restroom, we'd stop, but still be seated in the seats to eat lunch for 5 or 10 minutes and get going again. But when we were working, we were really intent on making some money and then getting back to adventure. So, you know, I don't know if I've spent that many hours in a seat besides like a one time at Baja 1000.
Yeah.
And never a sore back.
No.
Never anything.
They breathe really well, so you don't get like sweaty, like in the stock seats in Goose, you'd get like a sweaty back if you were sitting for too long, and like this, it doesn't. Yeah, they're really nice.
So I think if you're going to find yourself full timing it, definitely consider it. If not full time, I mean, who cares? You can sit on a 2x4.
And I'm sure there's other brands.
Weekend.
It's not necessary. Like we have School Mann, or however, I don't know how you say it. I'm probably saying it wrong. Yeah. But
yeah, there's Corbos and all kinds of other brands, but I'm a huge fan of the School Manns. If I were to do it again and we're full timing it, I will go out of my way to buy them.
It's really nice to have an armrest.
It is. And when I say a 2x4, of course, I'm referring to 90s Toyota seats, which if you have a Toyota pickup or a later Tacoma, you know that they're like a weird medieval torture device. Okay, let's see. Exhaust, intercooler, engine mods, very few. So we have a G Turbo. It's the grunter one. Weird name, but it's out of Australia. It's for low-end torque, and it doesn't really bring the boost up much higher than stock because we don't really have anything tuned up or turned up. It was on the truck when we bought it, so I wasn't going to try and find an OEM one to put on it. And it just comes on quickly, and it's a good amount of power, and we keep the turbo turned nice and low on the tuner. We haven't turned up the fuel or anything because I want reliability and fuel efficiency, and I don't care about power. We do have a top mount intercooler, so it's better than not having one, but we don't even have a fan on it, so we might add that at some point just to keep everything nice and cool. And other than that, there's really no mods. It's a side exit exhaust, so it is modified exhaust, very short side dump. It's a German brand. It sounds great, but I couldn't care less. I'm sure it's more free flowing than stock, but that's about it, really. Yeah. And I don't think we'll ever modify anything else except to put in an additional fuel filter before the factory one, possibly. Or just carry many of the OEMs and change them often. Power, battery, solar, and storage. Okay, so we're going to do a specific power video, but we have lithium starter, lithium house deep cycle, which is 100 amp hour, and the solar is 252, as I mentioned before. That's a Sunflare Explorer. These two anti-gravity batteries. Now, this one in the engine bay, it's not, from anti-gravity, it's insulated, but it's not. We don't have a warming blanket or anything else.
It's not necessarily meant for cold weather.
And we've had over a dozen mornings that are below freezing. And we've had zero issues.
Yeah, a lot of people asked about that, so we don't know. We're testing it out, and so far it's been great. So we'll let you know if it has any issues. Yeah, and we're kind of doing a trial run. I'm not telling you that a lithium starting battery in negative 20 degrees is the best idea or it will always work, but it has for us so far. And this is kind of a testing run. We do have backups if that were to fail, and I would just run, I have a couple of wires I can run from the deep cycle battery we could use to start the truck. We also have a micro start jump pack, and then it's a manual, so we could always ask somebody for a little tow or park on a hill if we were worried about it and bump start. So those were kind of the backups. We haven't needed any of it. It's been perfect so far. What's the weight empty and the payload? Well, the payload essentially from a stock 80 series being like, don't look at the written 80 series weight rating. There's a lot of guys who've measured their completely stock 80 series with fluids in it, and it's like 5280, something like that. And so from 5280, you can go up to 6600 is the quoted amount. So we're within that. But I know people who run 8,000 pound 80 series, and I'm sure their wheel bearings only last a couple 100,000 miles, but a couple 100,000 miles is more than most vehicles would last anyways, so it's not too bad. And let's see, how is it lighter than a stock 80? I think that's a good question. If you remember back, if you're wondering what on earth that question's about, I think when we first got it, I said, in essence, it's lighter than a stock 80. What I meant was, if I were to put stock 80 series wheels on this,
get rid of the auxiliary tank. I basically meant that by chopping off all that glass and steel of the back and getting rid of the sunroof and putting on this composite box home, it's probably lighter than a stock 80 series. So even though you've gained space, it's actually lighter. Now, fully built up with all the fluids.
All our stuff
we're gonna add a winch to it, all of our stuff. It's obviously heavier, hence the weight I quoted, but I think that's referencing that. And I'm out of my questions. Thank goodness. I'm tired of reading and talking. So I'm just gonna sit over here and look pretty.
Okay. Tires, size, brand, how they compare. I think you're gonna do a video fully on that, but we have the Toyo tires that we put on there. We started off with what the
Coopers.
guy had on there, Coopers.
So, excuse me. I'm really enjoying going back to the 255/85. Back in the early 2000s, that's what I ran on my 4Runner and Tacoma before that. And I like it. It's tall and skinny. I did love having the 35s because they're like having big balloon tires, and so they're like extra suspension, and in the sand dunes, they're giant pieces of flotation. But as soon as we started using the Coopers on this truck, I really didn't miss the big tires. I enjoyed how quick the steering felt and how nimble the truck felt.
And rarely did we feel like we were lacking the little bit of clearance that we lost.
Yep.
From the tires.
Yeah.
It
was like that first time I misjudged it and I could hear the pumpkin, the differential that you can see down there. It hit a rock and I went, aha. I feel the difference between the 35 and the 33, and then I would just choose accordingly when I chose lines.
And it did amazing in the sand dunes, which I was also a little worried about just because of the flotation, but it did. I mean,
yeah, because the skinnies, when they're aired down, they get nice and long. I also like being able to kind of thread the needle in choosing lines. The 35s, I would love 35-inch tires that were this wide, but 35 inches tall. They're so skinny, you can kind of thread a needle through rocks and choose lines. Whereas with Goose, you kind of got to the point where you would choose the general part of the trail you wanted to be on, but they were so wide, they were kind of clumsy in a sense. So I really do like these. So between the two different kinds we've had, I've had plenty of BFG 255, 85, 16s. We had the Coopers on this truck, and now we have the Toyos. I'll do a specific video because I could just go down a rabbit hole, but they've all been good.
Yeah.
We've had no flats with any of them.
No.
So great. They're all fantastic. And
the Coopers chunked a little bit, but I think they were old and probably...
They were older. We were in lava rock, and they're an all-terrain. They were more mild tire, and I think that, they had also hardened in the sun a little bit sitting on the truck for a year before we bought it without much use. Yeah. But, yeah, they were better on the highway than these. And probably definitely lighter than these.
Yeah, a lot lighter than this.
But in general, I appreciate the extra almost 3/4 of an inch of height that these have. But we'll do a whole video on those. So liking having the smaller tire, not regretting going away from 35s. If somebody makes a 35 by 10.5, 16, I'd buy it. Yeah. Otherwise, we'll probably stick with these.
Yeah. Where has the truck been in the world?
Before it was turned into a Maltec, Malti was kind enough to share like a YouTube video and some history of the truck and the previous owner when it was not a Maltec. It was just a white 80 series, and they went to, shoot, I'm gonna look it up again, but I think it was like Cambodia. I think that's where it was. Yeah. It hasn't done a lot of like internet. I mean, it was in Germany, obviously. Yeah. And then once it came to the US, I think maybe he went to Canada once. Yeah, he did a loop through Canada, the owner of it, once it was a Maltec. So since it's been a Maltec build, it's done a loop through Canada. Right after like delivery, it went through Moab and, got beat up a little bit there. We'll go back. Good for us because it lowered the price. Yeah, exactly. But that's about it. Yeah. Bushings, worth it, noticeable? All the replacement, you think, or? Yeah, I think so, because we went through and replaced all the bushings. Yeah, 100%. I mean, so this truck had a brand of aftermarket bushings that are fairly highly thought of, but we blew them out in the mapping work we were doing in just a couple of months. Again, it was every day, articulating more times per day than probably my old truck when I had an office job would per year. Yeah, that's ridiculous. So it's so intense, there's so much of it. It's not that we were doing anything super, super gnarly, but we were first gear, low range, going through some boulders, and it's just articulating it. And so it's like each articulation is taking some life out of those bushings. And so we killed them and cracked them and blew them out. And they were new as of a year before us buying the truck.
Yeah.
So what do? Well, you go OEM. Toyota OEM is amazing. And as soon as we pressed all those in,
So
everything
good.
was quiet.
Yeah.
No clunking, no noise whatsoever. So now it's back to like Goose. If there's a noise, something's wrong. Figure out what's making a noise.
Yeah.
So it was totally worth doing all those bushings.
Totally.
Yeah.
Rear control arms, castor correcting or stock?
Rear is all stock. Yes, we do have a fair amount of lift. The track bar is an aftermarket one that the previous owner did. I think the German owner, actually. And it's a cut and sleeved stock one. So I think we might go to an adjustable one because I don't like how it sets the rear axle. I think it's too much. Maybe he had a lot more lift back then, who knows. But so other than that, no, the rear is all stock. I was considering doing the castor correction upper arms, but you can get OEM arms with the bushings loaded in it so inexpensively, and we don't run much lift, so we've never had any sort of driveline issues or vibrations or U-joints wearing out because we're just not running a lot of lift. 2 inches, 2.5 probably in the rear when it's unloaded.
Yeah.
So
the manual transmission versus automatic.
I love the manual transmission.
Me too.
It's so much better and worse.
Yeah.
And so it's better because I love driving, and the only thing about overlanding I don't like is that I'm not as busy, and I like, when you're riding a dirt bike or a mountain bike, to like bike packing, or whether you're riding a motorcycle, whether for fun or for travel, you're so engaged because you have to be. There's a lot going on. There's a lot you need to do. You're engaged with the vehicle. And so I love that about this truck. I'm choosing my gear. I see a hill coming. Let me pre-select this gear. I see a river crossing or a muddy section. I'm gonna get into this gear now. It's gonna be perfect for that. And it takes me putting in all that effort. So it's harder. And I like that because it's our life. If I were just doing the Rubicon again and again and stuff like that, an automatic would be so much easier and better. But I love having the manual. It's a lot of fun. I also love on the big hill descents when, like, if we were back in Peru, when our brakes weren't working that well, and like we didn't know we'd arced a wire on a brake line. So not a vehicle fault, more of a Tim fault. But we didn't have any other really way to brake. We could self-select second gear or third in the automatic.
Yeah, the amount of times we wished we had a manual right then was a lot.
So I love it, but
I really do too, because I also enjoy the being engaged when you're driving. But I can see it being personal preference for both of us. We like it better. Like Tim said, I think it is actually probably a lot harder. So if in a, sense, automatic is probably better because you have no, rolling back or user error that way. But I prefer it. I think this manual is a really fun manual to drive.
Yeah.
Pretty easy manual.
Yeah.
But yeah, I prefer it. If camping in public, how do you shower? We kind of talked about that. We just wear a swimsuit.
Yep. We just don't really camp in public. So for camping in public, the few times I've ever had to camp in public would be at Overland Expo. And then if we paid for a campsite, but if we paid for a campsite, then
we're paying because it has a shower.
the whole point for us is we're those people who are like, I would never pay a penny for dirt. There's enough dirt to not have to pay.
If I'm paying, I want a shower, I want
Wi-Fi,
laundry,
shower, laundry.
Wi-Fi,
And so we're going to use all those facilities. So we just don't really run into it very often.
Yep. And then I think my last question is, do you carry a toilet? And no, we do not carry a toilet, but we have, whoa.
Can you see the bird?
I don't know if you guys can see that, but this bird is very brave and he just...
Hey, buddy.
I thought he was going to land on me.
Yeah.
Here you go. Finger? Maybe? Don't poop on me.
Alaska's pretty cool.
Hi. Yep, come down. Come down.
I'll sit on Dusty.
Bye, buddy. We do not carry a toilet, but we have little wag bags, so we can use those if it's a place where you need to have a bathroom, that sort of thing. We do have that option, or if there's an emergency, we can use them.
Yeah. That was just a choice we had to make in space. So the previous owner of the camp tech that we put on Goose, he had a plastic little toilet or whatever.
Cassette toilet, yeah.
Yeah, kind of like not even a cassette. It was like the chair that opened, and then it took the wag bags. I thought, look, if and it's this big thing, it's this big, and at its most folded down, it still took up a lot of space. And the idea, of course, would be to never use it. And so if you had to, it'd sure be nice, but why don't we just carry the bags that attach to it? And if you absolutely have to, You just use the bags.
Yeah.
And we've carried those bags now for 4 years.
Yep.
And never used one.
I've never used one, but it's nice to know that they're there.
Totally. You might be sick or something, and it's absolute necessity.
And there's been some places in, like, I think when we were in Antigua, that you had, like, if you were camping in the city, they didn't have a bathroom, so you had to have
So they required you being able to show them that you had that. And then, of course, you're still going to go somewhere else probably, but...
like a restaurant or something.
Yeah, the same with the Maze District in Utah. You have to show that you have the ability to go because they do not want you digging holes. And so you would use them there. Or the time I was in the Maze District, you just time it so you get out of there and back into a different subset of public lands, BLM or whatever the other land was, and then you can dig a hole there to the sufficient depth and take care of it that way. But no, haven't worried about that.
Yeah. I think that's all the questions. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but there's a helicopter over there. I think
we might get buzzed by some Blackhawks. Should be cool. So let us know. I know there's some other questions, and I bet there's some that we missed. So let us know.
Yeah,
and
sorry if we missed your question, and thank you for all the questions.
We're loving the truck. I mean, as far as the truck goes, it is everything I wanted it to be and more.
Yeah, it
That's
really
possible.
is. Yeah, it makes such a big difference.
It does. It does. The only thing I can do is if I could snap my fingers and put in the years of maintenance I had in the Goose.
Might have to wait a second for the audio.
That's cool. Yeah. Got skis on it. It's pretty cool. So, yeah, I think that's about the only thing I could imagine, though, is just we had to get to know the new truck and what hadn't been done and go, okay, let's do this, let's do that.
Yeah, and it's been a process, which it's a lot of work to do. But we're getting to the point where I think we're over the hump, and just the sheer amount of enjoyment that we've gotten from the truck. And I mean, the fact that we're able to do this trip right now, sitting in snow, and we're not worried about being cold.
Warm tonight.
We have a heater. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it solves every issue that we ever had with Goose.
Yeah.
Right? I can't think of one. Like, I always wanted more range, even though we built the auxiliary tank. There were certain little areas that were very obscure in South America. We didn't go because even with all the range we had.
We really wanted a manual, both of us.
Yep.
That's lucky that this has it.
Yep. And then the ability to sleep inside.
Yeah, down below.
Away from the weather.
A huge thing.
I think of the last few nights that we had, if in Goose, basically in the camp tech, it's so skinny that your arm would be touching the fabric, because I don't know.
Try to scooch and like be as close as you could to the other person so that your arm wasn't touching, but then your sleep, like your blankets, your sleeping bag, whatever was still touching that, so it'd always be wet or frozen.
So it's raining, it's wet. If it's frozen outside, your arm's frozen or your blanket's frozen.
If it's loud outside, it's loud outside.
Yep, it's smoky outside, it's smoky inside.
You're in a tent, yeah.
This insulates us from the world when we want to be.
But we also have the option to sleep in a tent, which is awesome most of the time.
Yeah, most of the time we're up top, all the windows are open, it's amazing, you got a fan going on you, and it's wonderful. But when you're here, it's really nice to be able to hop inside, and like in a little bit here, we're gonna sit inside, make dinner. I don't care if a storm moves in and there's bad winds and there's snow, doesn't matter.
It's fine. Yeah, so that's really cool. Anyways, I think we'll end our little Q&A. Like you said, let us know if you have any other questions down below. Let us know what you thought of this. Like and subscribe, because we have to say that because we're YouTubers, guys. That's dumb, don't put that in.
We're gonna leave that in.
No.
Thank you guys, appreciate you.
Thanks for watching, guys, and we look forward to showing you all of the Alaska videos because it's been
amazing. I can't wait to share.
Crazy. Yep, so see you guys later.